Mr. Assange was arrested and placed in international extradition proceedings based upon a European arrest warrant. The EU countries have a treaty that provides for a fast-track extradition from one EU country to another. But let's assume hypothetically that Mr. Assange loses his extradition hearing in the UK and is now in jail in Sweden facing the sex crime charges. What happens next? Well, either of two things is going to happen. The first, Mr. Assange proceeds to trial in Sweden and either wins or loses his Swedish case. The U.S. perhaps has indicted him at this point and seeks to have him extradited to the U.S. following either a finding of not guilty or after he serves his Swedish jail time if convicted. Following a U.S. extradition request, Mr. Assange either voluntarily agrees to be extradited to the U.S. or contests that extradition. The process could take years from now. Or the second thing that could happen is that Mr. Assange arrives in Sweden from the UK and learns that pursuant to the Article 6 of the supplement to the extradition treaty that's between the US and Sweden, that Sweden has decided on its own, with no input from Mr. Assange, that Sweden is transferring Mr. Assange to the US to stand trial on the federal criminal charges. Mr. Assange is then whisked away by the U.S. Marshal Service and the FBI. He lands in the U.S. and he's put to trial on the U.S. charges. If he loses his U.S. federal criminal case, he is looking at very significant U.S. jail time without the possibility of parole or early release. Instead of serving jail in the U.S., he really would be returned to Sweden, right? Well, perhaps not. There is a provision in the supplementary treaty that Mr. Assange is to be returned to Sweden, quote, after the conclusion of the proceedings, end quote, in accordance with conditions to be determined by mutual agreement between the U.S. and Sweden. The two countries could possibly agree, though, that Mr. Assange would not be returned to Sweden until after the completion of his U.S. jail time. The net effect is that Sweden gets their man temporarily, and the U.S. gets its man, and significant time and resources have been saved by all countries involved. And it's all legal. I'm Douglas McNabb, senior partner with the law firm of McNabb Ferrari.